Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the UAB Heersink School of Medicine Grand Round Series. I'm Anupam Agarwal, Executive Vice Dean for the UAB Heersink School of Medicine. This is our first Grand Rounds in 2022. I'm truly excited to welcome you all today. This is a series of Grand Rounds we have every quarter, and we feature an outstanding speaker on a timely topic of interest to everyone. Today, we will be welcoming Dr. Thom Mayer, who will present on leading in healthcare and how we all have a major role to play. To introduce Dr. Mayer, I'm delighted to turn the floor over to Dr. Jean Larson, who is our Chief Leadership Development Officer for UAB Medicine and also Senior Associate Dean of Leadership Development for the Heersink School of Medicine. Dr. Larson.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal, and welcome to Grand Rounds, Dr. Mayer. Dr. Mayer comes to us today with a wealth of knowledge to share, and here are some of his roles and accolades. Dr. Mayer is founder and chief executive officer of Best Practices, Inc., executive vice president of MCare, a clinical professor of emergency medicine at George Washington University, and a senior lecturing fellow at Duke University. He's a medical director for the National Football League's Players Association, a job, I might add, that comes with a perk or two. He recently shared a photo of himself holding the Vince Lombardi trophy on the field at the end of the Super Bowl, which was awesome. He is one of the most widely sought speakers on healthcare customer service, trauma, emergency care, pediatric emergency care, medical leadership, and sports medicine. Additionally, on September 11th, 2001, Dr. Mayer served as one of the command physicians at the Pentagon rescue operation, coordinating medical assets at the site. Dr. Mayer has served on the Department of Defense on Defense Science Board task forces on bioterrorism, homeland security, and the consequences of weapons of mass destruction. His approach to job satisfaction and wellness is far-reaching, as is his notable career. So a little bit of a backstory on how I met Thom, if you will. Recently, I had the opportunity to review some final manuscripts of books on various leadership topics for Barrett Kohler. I was very fortunate that one of those books is Dr. Mayer's most recent book called Battling Healthcare Burnout, Learning to Love the Job You Have While Creating the Job That You Love. The manuscript was excellent, it was grounded in current research, but it also provided some very practical solutions for leaders who want to reduce burnout in their own lives as well as their organizations. Using quotes and stories from literature and classic writers, the book connects the issue of burnout and finding joy at work as really part of the human condition throughout the ages. He even asked me to write a promotional blurb, which I was happy to do. I later found out that my blurb was one of several by some individuals you may have even heard of, Dr. Don Berwick, Dr. Tate Shanafelt, and Charles Stokes, among others. So you can see his work comes highly recommended. So Dr. Mayer, I look forward to hearing more about your approach, as well as how some of your thoughts and ideas can help all of us. Dr. Mayer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Larson. I appreciate that generous and kind introduction. That's as good as it gets. The last time I was introduced, they introduced me as a very humble man about whom there's a great deal to be humble. So that was a huge upgrade. So thank you very, very much for that. And I look forward to sharing some ideas with you guys. I'm going to share my screen very quickly. But to tell you how grateful I am to be here, both because of Dr. Larson, my huge amount of respect for Dr. Selwyn Vickers, and also Dr. Agarwal. So pleasure to be here. The topic they asked me to address is It Begins With You, Reconnecting to Your Deep Joy. And you'll see the subtitle here, and I'll get to that here in just a second. But I appreciate the chance to chat with you. There will be an ample time for questions and answers, either through the chat or opening mics at the end. So feel free to weigh in on that. I certainly don't like education, adult education, when it becomes that process by which the notes of the speaker become the notes of the audience without passing through the mind of either. So we'll try to make sure that does not happen today. I'm also mindful of the great Mark Twain, who said, no sinners get saved more than 20 minutes into a sermon. So I'll keep my remarks as brief as I can. I might not hit 20 minutes, but I'll keep it as brief as we can. Not that I'm on the pulpit in any way, although I was a theology major. So one of the things I want to talk a little bit about is this concept that why healthcare leading matters. And my point, which is perhaps non-intuitive or even counterintuitive, is that leadership is worthless, but leading is priceless. Why? Because leadership is a noun, something on a shelf, some slides, a group of DVDs or links that you can go to. Whereas leading is not only a verb, it's a verb in the active voice. It's something that people do and continuously do. So the leading idea of being an active voice verb, and the fact that each of you are leaders for reasons that we'll get into. Now, to illustrate that, let me start with, if you look on the lower left side of your slide there, you see a little cartoon with the Roman Legionnaire. Bro, do you even lift? And this wizened old fella says, I do. Yes, sometimes I do. Well, the wizened old fellow, as you may recall, is Archimedes. And Archimedes, among many other things, said, give me a lever long enough and I can move the world. So I'd like to talk a little bit in the short time that we have about what are the levers to help us move our world, both personally, professionally, and what we do with healthcare writ large. Most important slide by far, that's my email address. Reach out to me anytime. I don't have a website. I don't have anything to sell you, but hopefully I have a few things to give to you, which might be of value. I don't have a social media presence. You don't have to like me, but hopefully you'll like some of the things that I have to say and should feel free to use them in any way. You'll have copies of these slides if you'd like themselves. So let me know if I can help in any way. I know from working with your patient experience group and Dean Vickers and Dean Agarwal and Dr. Larson, that this concept of evolving is important. So it shouldn't surprise us what Darwin said, which is not the strongest of the species that survives, not the most intelligent that survives, but the one that is most adaptable to change. And our role, as we get back to, it begins with you, nothing about you without you. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, and the importance of our ability to initiate change. So I have three goals. Number one, I want you to think about it begins with you and leading, not leadership, but leading in a radically different way. Number two, I want you to act on those thoughts within a week, because frankly, if you don't do that within a week, you're not going to do it at all. You may have a great set of notes. You may have this set of slides. You might have my book or other people's books, but unless you act on those different thoughts within a week, nothing's going to happen. And third, and most important, is I want you to innovate yourself and your team to evolve, both the system and yourselves. And innovation doesn't occur at the speed, as Darwin might have said, of strength, of intelligence, or even of creativity. Innovation occurs at the speed of trust. Because if you don't trust the people around you to fail, then you can't innovate. You'll only be developing best practices, if you will, or adopting them a little faster than the folks down the street or across the country, as the case may be. So understand what Samuel Beckett, the great playwright, said: try, fail, try again, fail again, fail better. And that's what innovation is. So we have to think about that. And when someone says to you, think outside the box, you just smile to yourself, because most of the time when people say that, they're not saying think outside the box. They're saying think inside my box. Think the way I think. So keep that in mind. Think, act, and innovate. We'll come back to that. My beautiful and brilliant wife, Maureen, and I have three boys, now young men. You can see them in this picture. When they were younger, I used to drop them off at school every day. And when I did, I would say to them precisely the same thing, which is one more step in the journey of discovering where your deep joy intersects the world's deep needs. They preferred to take the bus. Trust me, they don't want to hear this from their dad. But my point is, we have to start with our deep joy in healthcare, regardless of what we do in healthcare. Because if it begins with you, the work begins within for everyone, and reconnecting to that deep joy is one of the principal functions, particularly in the midst of change, particularly in the midst of burnout and the job stressors that we see. So keep that in mind. I've been lucky to lead in times of crisis from the day that Corey Stringer died on August 1st, 2001, September 11th, that I was in that aircraft landing at the Pentagon, the inhalational anthrax crisis. We've been through both the concussion and the COVID crisis. And I'm actually getting ready to deploy to Ukraine next week. So the point is, you know, it's not that I've been through it, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, but you've been through it. You just came through a pandemic which shook the world. You led yourself, you led your teams in a way that was heroic. So will you do it? Will you run into the fire? The answer is yes, you already have. You've already done it before. And I have to tell you a quick aside, I used to, or I still do, give speeches with Lou Holtz, Coach Holtz from Notre Dame, also coached for the Vikings, as you know, in South Carolina. And he always has the courtesy of coming a little bit ahead of time to hear the previous speaker. And I was talking about leading in times of crisis. So when he got up on stage, he looked down and said, "Doctor, you know, planes flying into buildings, bioterrorism, men smashing into each other." He said, "Has it ever occurred to you, you might be bad luck?" So hopefully I'm not bad luck, but in a way you think about it, we're all bad luck in that we live and work every day. We live and breathe the health and the disease that our patients have. So the sick ones come to us in the first place and we take care of them. And I'll close with a comment about that. So I would tell you, Jean Ann was very kind to talk about the book. It's 300 pages long, but this is it in 33 words. And I think if you choose to write a book, and I hope many of you do, you ought to be able to summarize it in 30 to 50 words at maximum. And here's the 3 insights. Every member of the healthcare team is a leader. All of you, no matter what you do, no matter where you are in the organization, you're a leader. Lead yourself, lead your team. Number 2, every healthcare team member is a performance athlete, no different than my athletes in the NFL, involved in a cycle of performance, rest, and recovery. Performance, rest, and recovery. So treat yourself as a performance athlete, invest in yourself, invest in your team. And third, the work begins within. The work begins within. Now, does it also involve the system and the culture? Of course it does. But the work begins within, which I think what Dean Vickers was talking about when saying it begins with you. No matter where you are in the organization, reconnecting your passion to purpose. Now, when you say the work begins within, some people in healthcare say, yeah, patient first, it's destroyed us, the stresses that we have, we've just come through the pandemic and it's burnt us out. So 2 corollaries to the work begins within, it begins with you. Number 1, if you're on an airliner and the plane decompresses, the flight attendants are going to tell you what they tell you in the briefing every day, put your own oxygen mask first. If you want to help other people, you have to help yourself, number 1. And number 2, self-care is critical care. So invest in yourself, invest in your team. And I have to tell you, that third question I usually ask of organizations when I speak, because far too often those organizations are focused on metrics instead of the personal development of the team. We are investing in your leadership training. And here's where I admire Deans Vicker and Agarwal and Dr. Larson, because this very conference, this Grand Rounds, is about developing you as individuals in the team. So you're light years ahead of most organizations around the country, at least the ones I've spoken to. So here's my question. Is that you going into work or going home? It's a legitimate question. Is that the way you feel going into work, or is it just the way you feel going home from work? Because my postulate is that you deserve to feel that way every day when you go into work. You should feel like you're jumping for joy because the job you do is a job that has incredible honor, incredible meaning, and has an incredible impact on all of the people, not just the patient and their family, but the people with whom you work. We'll talk about teams in a minute. So we talked about deep joy, deep need. That's an exercise. Think about it. What's your deep joy? Look at a picture of yourself in nursing school or medical school, or when you applied for medical school, if you happen to be in medical school now, and write a letter or give a talk to that person about what the deep joy was that started you there in the first place, and how you're going to reconnect your passion to the purpose that you solved there. The great General Ferdinand Foch, who, as you may know, was the supreme commander of the First World War of the Allied Expeditionary Force, said there's no force on earth as strong as the human soul on fire. And that is absolutely true for all of you, for everyone in that organization. And as I'm about to discover when I go to Ukraine, that is what is firing the Ukrainian people right now, that force of the human soul on fire. We also have to avoid rust out, the path by which we not get all the way to burnout, but start to rust out. And like the Tin Man and the Wizard of Oz, begin to have our joints creak a little bit. Think about this. Our healthcare system is burning patients out as well. So it's not been talked about. I write about it in the book, and I'm working on a piece for JAMA on this right now, but there's patient burnout as well. And then it's worth it. I can tell you, having done this work for a very long time, it's so gratifying to have people say, like you see the quote here, you showed me the nurse I was and the nurse I'm going to be again. And hopefully how to do that. The how is a little bit more involved than a 25, 30-minute talk. Because as you walk around the halls of the hospital, I'm afraid you see this. The fact is that the way we're working isn't working. And people feel that depletion of ability. And we'll talk some about how to define that and what to do about it. I believe very strongly that no matter what you're doing in healthcare, the definitions have to drive solutions. Too often definitions are sterile and we repeat them back, but they don't say, okay, how does that drive me towards solving that clinical entity, that leading entity, that burnout entity? And to me, it's very simple. And that is, burnout is simply a ratio of job stressors divided by adaptive capacity or resiliency. Have the stressors to you and your organization gone up in the last 2 years? Of course they have. Does the EHR create more stressors or relieve more stressors? And we could go on and on. So the point is, if we're going to fix burnout, then the solution is really simple, meaning decrease the job stressors or increase the adaptive capacity. Now, resiliency and adaptive capacity to me are synonymous. So you could put an equal sign there and that would be just fine. The reason I say adaptive capacity is a couple of things. One, for some people, they don't like the term resiliency. It just sounds too much like touchy-feely, kumbaya, we're going to sit and meditate. And I'm not downplaying any of that. I'm just saying you'll have to hear in yourself, listening to yourself, is, do you like the term resiliency or adaptive capacity? Because it is truly the ability to adapt to the job stressors, which, if not done well, result in Christina Maslach's cardinal symptoms of burnout, which are emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and loss of meaning at work. But the cause are the stressors and the adaptive capacity. I was a linebacker when I was in college, as you might guess from my demeanor. Fortunate to start in my freshman year, which not all the senior linebackers and junior and sophomore linebackers love. But I'll never forget my coach saying to the entire defense prior to the first game, Mayer, you're the middle linebacker. My linebackers are agile, mobile, and hostile. What do you think of that? And I said, Coach, I'm all down with that. 100%. But I'm the Mike linebacker. I got to be able to read and react. I got to be able to adapt. So I got to adapt as well. And he thought for a second and he said, my linebackers are agile, mobile, hostile, and adaptile. And that's what we have to be. We have to be adaptile to be able to deal with those job stressors, because some of them can't be completely eliminated. More on that in a few minutes. The framework's very simple, and that is there's organizational adaptive capacity and resiliency, and there's personal adaptive capacity and resiliency. As I said, the work begins within the lower third, reigniting personal passion, and that's personal resilience. But there's also organizational resilience. What's the culture of your organization? People say to me, oh, our culture is great. I go on site and do a consult and they say, oh, our culture is amazing. And my question then is, why are 50% of your people burned out if your culture is so great? And culture is simple. You want to know what the culture of your organization is? It's you. It's what you do every day. So the way culture is created is by what you do, what your teams do on a daily basis. Second, there's hardwiring flow. And hardwiring flow simply means, what are the systems and processes? And can we stop doing stupid stuff and start doing smart stuff? And we do a lot of stupid stuff in healthcare. So think about that. Who's going to help you do that? And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then finally, of course, the work begins within. Now, why I say the work begins within, it begins with you, is that personal transformation starts first. And then you start to talk about, okay, we as a team are going to change the culture and change hardwire flow into the systems and processes in which we work. Be very careful about the words on the walls versus the happenings in the halls. What's said in the mission, vision, and value statements as you walk along the halls of your corridor. If it says patient first and you have posters like the one on the lower left of teamwork, but the reality on the day-to-day basis is what you see on the right, then that's what I mean by the happenings on the halls on the right and the words on the walls on the left. And the same is true of us. If we have our own personal mission, vision, and values, but we're not living them out, and we are the people that you see on the right-hand side, we have to deal with that. So Christina Maslach, and I won't go into great detail, but these are the 6 domains that she and Michael Leiter talked about, which is number 1, a mismatch between a job stressors and adaptive capacity. Number 2, a loss of control. How many of you feel you're held accountable for a system over which you have little or no control? Well, probably everyone's hand is raised. A lack of rewards and recognition, a sense that people care about each other and themselves, a loss of community or teamwork, a sense of a lack of fairness. We're being asked too much, so job stressors go up, but people aren't investing in us enough when it comes to our adaptive capacity. And then the worst, of course, is the loss of values, where there is a mismatch between the words on the walls and the happenings in the halls. And that's out the vector of moral injury that is a separate topic, but one we might address sometime in the future. Remember what the great Paul Batalden said: every system is perfectly designed to get precisely the results it gets. Brilliant insight. So if you say, I'm not getting the results I want, are you going to change the people? Or are you going to change the system? Well, you should change the system. Now, as it turns out, to change the system requires the personal transformation we're talking about. But it is the system that is designed to do that. And we are here to change the system to make it work better for the patient, better for us, and better for the team. We live in the perpetual whitewater of change, these class 5 rapids, dangerous, exciting, exhilarating. You know, you could get injured, you could lose your life. Obviously, that doesn't happen too often, but it could. So what we have to get used to is evolving, changing, and become expert change accelerators, evolutors. I made that word up, but it fits with your idea of evolution and that of Darwin as well. You will have resistance, and the more staunch the resistance, all they're telling you is they have uncertainty. They don't know what to do. So help them make that transformation by taking their anxieties and say, how are we going to redesign the culture and redesign systems and processes, hardwiring flow? We're going to ask you to do that. More on that in just a minute. And then just remember, everyone at every level, that all meaningful and lasting change is intrinsically motivated. If we say, do it because I'm the dean and I say so, it's not going to work, is it? Doesn't work with your kids, does it? When you say, because I'm the mommy, because I'm the daddy. People have to understand that the change, number 1, will be authored by them, at least partially and meaningfully, and that it will be maintained over time by their efforts, not by the boss, not by the CEO, not by the dean, but by the people who do the work on a day-to-day basis. I've been deployed several times on aircraft carriers, and one of the great things that you learn is they aren't with you on the takeoff. They won't be with you on the landing. What do I mean by that? You want to change systems and processes. You want to change the culture. Who's going to design that? You are. You are. If you're an ICU nurse, if you're an ICU doc, you're going to redesign the processes and systems and the culture in that particular ICU or floor unit or outpatient unit or joint replacement or emergency department, which happens to be what I am. So you are the authors of your fate. And of course, that sort of reminds you of Invictus. More on that if we have time. I challenge you to think about this. Make the patient a part of the team. All of those folks on the perimeter are important. Docs, nurses, lab, x-ray, and housekeeping. They're critically important. By the way, what do you call lab, x-ray, housekeeping? They are blank services. Most healthcare systems say they're ancillary services. I trained in theology and I learned early that all language has meaning and all behavior has meaning. Ancillary is derived from the Latin ancilla, which means female slave. Is that what they are? I don't think so. Change the name today, not ancillary services, essential service partners, members of the team who are essential to us succeeding. But the biggest issue is that lady that you see there, her kind face, those wise eyes. Are you making the patient not just part of the team, but the center of the team? And you don't have to change the entire healthcare system and Heersink School of Medicine. Change it yourself every time you're at the bedside by saying, we have a great team of people here, but you're the most important player on this team. Not just what's the matter with you, find it, fix it, which I'm an ER doc, that's what we do, find it, fix it. But what matters to you? Because we should be saying to the patient, nothing about you without you. Without your voice, without your input, we're not going to do anything, whether it's any of these essential services that you see around you. So ask yourself the next time you're on the floor, am I making the patient a part of the team? We operate in teams. Do we hire for teams? Do we train for teams? The paradox of teamwork, and obviously this comes a lot from my NFL experience. You know, you can, listen, you're at one of the most prestigious medical centers in the world. You can confidently assure your patients that they'll be cared for by a team of experts. Every person in that ER cast that you see there is smart. And all of them except one are good looking. And that exception, of course, would be Anthony Edwards in the back row in the center, who looks like me. So other than that, you know, they're all good looking. But can you assure them that they'll be taken care of by an expert team? Because a team of experts and an expert team are not the same thing. We have to be able to work across boundaries as a team. Look at the NFL last year, look at the NCAA men's and women's basketball finals now, and you're seeing expert teams, not just teams of experts. Quick football deal, smart people don't equal smart teams. I hope this isn't painful, and because you've got Falcons fans in the audience, this is Super Bowl 50. And what you see on the left is Matt Ryan, of course, and what you see on the right is Tom Brady. And I would just tell you that you may not remember, but that's the biggest collapse in Super Bowl history, the biggest lead that was taken over in the second half. How did it happen? Did Matty Ryan on the left get dumb and bad at halftime and therefore was sacked, as you see in that picture? No, of course not. Did Tom Brady, TB12 on the right, suddenly get incredibly smart and talented at halftime? No. What happened was a 67-year-old man named Dominic Scarnecchia, known as widely as Dom Scar, the offensive line coach for the Patriots, reminded his staff at halftime that he had a simple way to block, and that is thumbs up, fingers out, thumbs up, fingers out. Okay. Now do me a favor. I can't see you, but put your thumbs up and your fingers out. What happens to your elbows? They come into your side. And what you see on the left-hand side there is that tackle, number 70, has his thumbs in and his fingers up. And what does that do to your elbows? It creates a lever. Give me a lever long enough and I can move the world. So my point is, smart people don't equal smart teams. Coach details. The details of it begins with you, the work begins within, changing culture and hardwiring flow by being able to change systems and processes to stop doing stupid stuff and start doing smart stuff. So teamwork matters, but it's not a slogan on the wall. It's a detail. This is a religious slide because you look at a slide like that and you say, Lord, he's not going to read that, is he? And trust me, for the students and residents that might be in the audience, don't ever load a slide like that. I did for a purpose, and that is Dr. Larson was kind enough to talk about the book, where fully a third of the book is on tools for battling burnout: passion, shaping culture, and hardwiring flow, personal resilience and organizational resilience. And I'll only talk about a couple of those. So number one, say thank you 50 times a day. Starting today, 50 times, say thank you. Thank you to the patient. Thanks for coming to see us. To the family, thanks for entrusting your care. If you happen to be a physician, to the nurse, thanks for your help, and do it in front of the patient. This is a poster that is in the locker room of the Denver Broncos. You cannot leave any locker room door without seeing that up there, which you can read, but it says, you can easily judge the character of a man by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. And I said to the trainers and the medical staff, what's up with that? And they said, oh, Coach Koobs, it was Coach Gary Kubiak at that time, feels very strongly about that. Now, some of you in the audience know that's Goethe. You know, Goethe lives in NFL locker rooms. That's not a quote from a football coach. That's a quote from a great German writer, philosopher, and theologian. So that's true in your organization as well. We should always thank those around us for what they do and how they do it. I can say more about that in Q&A if you want. Do the things you tell your patients to do. You know, do you tell your patients to exercise? Yes. Do you tell your patients to eat right? Yes. Do you tell them to sleep right? Yes. Do you tell them to enjoy the moment? If you're seeing at 3 o'clock in the morning, a kid in the pediatric emergency department who's happy and laughing and you're wondering why they're there, enjoy that kid. It's a blessing to you, not why did they bring this kid in? So what my point is treat those things like medications because they are medications. Don't ever tell a patient to do something that you're not doing yourself. Now, you may have to tell the patient and then start doing it yourself. I'm not telling you to start exercising before you tell them to, but be a role model for that and for what you do, because the work begins within, correct, but you're a performance athlete. Invest in yourself, invest in the time, put on your own oxygen mask first, and understand that self-care is critical care. This one might help you a little bit. It's an exercise I ask every person to do, but I also ask every team to do, every organization to do. 3 simple questions. What do you love about your job? What's your deep joy? Number 2, what do you hate? And number 3, what do you tolerate? Because all 3 things will be true in your job. That's for sure, no matter what your job is within that, including housekeeping, all those essential services we talk about. Because then what you can do is begin to sit down thinking about definition driving solutions, job stressors, adaptive capacity, maximize what you love. If you love being at the bedside with a patient, then maximize your time at the bedside with the patient. And there are ways to do that. What do you hate? Often the EHR comes up there, and there's solutions for that as well. A whole chapter in the textbook, chapter 11, as I recall. And then what do you tolerate? What's just there? It's not, making you jump for joy, but it's also not making you feel, head over the stethoscope as we saw before. Once you do it personally, do it as a team, do it as a unit, do it as a shift, and think about what do you love, what do you hate, and what do you tolerate, particularly across the seams of the team, not just the docs, but the nurses, not just the docs and the nurses, but the essential services people, not just the emergency department, but the hospital medicine service or the surgical service or the trauma service to whom we admit patients. So think about that and put it to use. Communication, totally different talk, hour to 2 and on its own, sometimes up to 4. But communication we think of as what we say or what we write, but it's also what we do. And it's importantly what we do when we listen. And I would just tell you, most people, when they are listening, aren't listening. They are waiting impatiently for the person who's talking to stop so they can talk. Think about that the next time you're on rounds. Think about the next time you're talking to somebody in the unit and begin to think, because if you take those 6 letters and simply rearrange them, you get a completely different, in some ways, more powerful word, silent. Listening requires silence, not just not saying anything, but silence of your mind, silence of your soul, the ability to say, I'm here to absorb what you have to say to me. And I would just tell you this dynamic tension, and I love dynamic tensions of communication, is advocate as if you were right. Stand for the passion, your deep joy, your deep needs, but listen as if you were wrong. Meaning, listen, I'm assuming I'm wrong about this, but I'm going to absorb what you have to say so that I can become better and understand your perspective as well, particularly the patients and families, but all the other team members as well. When should you do this? Right now. As you don't want to be the dinosaur saying, was that today? Every day is today for you and for the patients and the family and for the team that you work with. In the 50s, what biotechnology is now, physics was then. And you see two great physicists here. On the right is Niels Bohr, on the left is Wolfgang Pauli. And in 1956 at Columbia University in the summer, Pauli presented a unified field theory that took general relativity, special relativity, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, and tried to tie it all together. He gave his paper, and at the time, Bohr and Einstein were the most respected people. Bohr was the discussant of his paper, and he stood up and he said, Dr. Fermi, we all agree that your theory is crazy. The question, which divides us, is it crazy enough? What's my point? Are you crazy enough? Are you crazy enough to change yourselves and change the system, change the culture, stop doing stupid stuff and start doing smart stuff? Because if you aren't, go get crazy. If you're a senior resident, encourage crazy. If you're a chief of service or a head nurse, encourage crazy. Because you do want people to think about how could we do it differently? Why are we doing it this way? And why can't we do it another? As we sort of approach a bit of the lee of the storm of the pandemic, certainly not over yet, there's a lot of literature talking about the Sisyphean nature of the struggle. And as you may recall, Sisyphus is condemned to endlessly roll the boulder up to the top of the mountain, only to turn and see it roll back down again. Well, that's more of our struggle. You know, I was at the Pentagon, that was 3 days. I was in the inhalational anthrax crisis, that was 3 weeks. You know, we're now in the second year, heading towards the third year of this pandemic. But remember what the great writer and philosopher Albert Camus said. He wrote the great essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, talking about Sisyphus and talking about that moment where he sees the boulder rolling back downhill and says, Sisyphus smiles. The last sentence is, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. Well, we should be happy. We should jump for joy. We should feel that we are privileged to do the job we do, but we should feel free to change ourselves and change the job to fit our needs as well as that of the team and the patients itself. This is a great George Washington Carver. He said, how far you go in life depends upon, wow, that's a pretty good open book question, isn't it? You know, fill in the blank. How about if you got kids, ask them that question as well, particularly adolescent kids. But think about this. This is what that great man said. How far you go in life depends upon your being tender with the young, compassionate with the aged, sympathetic with the striving, and tolerant of the weak and strong. Because someday in your life, you will have been all of these things. Ladies and gentlemen, every day in your life, you get to see and take care of all of those things. What a privilege, what a pleasure, what a stressful job, but one which can be dealt with if we develop our adaptive capacity and resiliency. And I'll close with this. It's a brief story. I told you I was a theology major. And senior year, regardless of what religion you study under, mine happened to be Presbyterian at that time, though we're Catholic now, is stories, different kinds of stories. To me, they were hokey stories. Where are you going today, Tom? I'm going to Hokey Stories 101. So one of the stories that was told in our fourth year class in theology was this one that I'm about to tell you. So danger, danger, hokey story. If you have Zofran, pop one, can be nauseating, so hokey. That's how bad it is. But the story is told in our area of the country, Washington, D.C. area, which is where I am right now. People want to relax, take it easy. They go to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, Cape Hatteras, Manteo, Duck. These are the names of the towns on in the border islands that are out there, because the Outer Banks is literally a spit out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And this, you know, type A personality brings his businessman wound around the axle, brings his family there to try to be able to unwind and untie the knots of 50 weeks of the year in 2 weeks. He checks in. It's a beautiful day. They check into this big house. As you've seen them, they're up on stilts. The Gulf Coast often has those as well, or pylons. And the reason is when the storm surges come in, doesn't knock the house down. Hits the pylons, all good. So he checks in. The story is told. The hokey story is told. And that night, there's a heck of a storm. And I'm telling you, the waves are hitting so hard, the wind and the rain is driving so hard, it's coming in horizontal instead of vertical, but he sleeps really well. And the next morning he gets up, he walks out, crystal clear, 6:30 in the morning, no one else is up. Not a cloud in the sky, perfectly flat ocean despite the storm last night. Only one problem, and that is it looks like every starfish in the sea has been dumped on the beaches of the Outer Banks. He looks to his left, looks to his right, all he can see is starfish. Except to the left, he sees one person. There's only one person on the beach. This is not going where you think, by the way. So he turns that way and he walks that way, picking his way between the starfish. And as he gets closer, he gets curious because he realizes whoever this person is bending over and standing up, bending over and standing up very, very rhythmically. He gets even closer, he gets more curious because he realizes it's a little girl. She's about 9 years old. She's picking up starfish one by one and throwing it back in the ocean. And he walks up to her and says, little girl, I don't mean to burst your bubble, but what you're doing can't possibly make any difference. You've only cleared about a 9-foot area in the 15 minutes I've been walking this way. There's hundreds of thousands of starfish we can see. There's probably millions that we can't see on this beach. So I hate to tell you this, but what you're doing can't possibly make any difference. And the little girl looks at the starfish in her hand and looks at the guy and says, it does to this one, and throws it back. Well, gag me, I got that. What's the point? That's what you do. Every day you walk into that medical school. Every day you walk into that hospital, no matter what you do, no matter where you do it. You take care of the one in front of you. What are you doing? I'm taking care of my patient. We never say a patient, the patient. It's my patient. We take responsibility and we throw it back. Now, what do you think if you got kids and you sent them off to their English teacher and you say, what should we call someone who does that? Who does the best they possibly can, one at a time, not for themselves, but for others. They do it with style, grace, dignity, and equanimity. And they come back with the same 4-letter word. That word, think about it, is hero. And so here's my question. When you work at that medical center, when you go to school at the Heersink School of Medicine, when you teach at that medical school, do you feel like a hero? And what concerns me is how many times people softly, sadly shake their heads. No, I don't feel like a hero. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're not a hero, who is? You take care of people who can't, don't, won't take care of themselves. You give them back their dignity. Your deep joy connects to their deep needs right there. And I would just tell you, I am so proud to be one of you. I'm so proud to be a healer. I'm so proud to be a team member that's involved in this wonderful jump for joy, or should be, process by which we can work with each other for the good of others, as well as for ourselves. So the work begins within, and I hope that this has helped in some small way. If you have questions or comments, particularly pushback, I'd be happy to take it.
Thank you, Dr. Mayer, for a truly engaging presentation, really wonderful. I'm sure there's a lot we can learn and take away from your key messages, and there's a lot of questions already posted in the comments that we will address in a bit, but some of the takeaways or pearls that I had, fail better. The work begins within. Put your oxygen mask first. The 6 domains for burnout were really amazing. Say thank you 50 times a day, and I will surely, begin to do that. I'd like to ask Noah Andrews, who is with our Heersink School of Medicine team, to facilitate the Q&A session. So if you have questions, please drop them in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and we will address them with Dr. Mayer. Noah?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Agarwal, and thank you, Dr. Mayer. We do have plenty of questions. We'll try and get to as many as we can, but we do want to be aware of your time as well. So, Dr. Mayer, can you talk a little bit more about the focus of the next play? I know that you've written about that a little bit in your book, and if you could just expound upon that just a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Noah. It's an important piece. There's so much I would have loved to say, but I couldn't just because of time reasons. So thank you. And if you talk to any, let's stick with quarterbacks. If you talk to Drew Brees, if you talk to Tom Brady, if you talk to Aaron Rodgers, if you talk to Russell Wilson, and I've seen it happen over and over again. Parents in particular, but kids will come up and say, I want to play professional football. I want to play at the next level. I want to play Sunday football. What do I need to focus on? They're going to tell you the same thing, the next play. Don't focus on your arm strength, going downfield deep, crossing routes. Focus on the next play, the next thing in front of you. And I think it's brilliant for 1,000 different reasons, not the least of which is it helps us realize it's not ethereal. It's not something off in the future. The future is now. The future is the next play. And for us, that means the next patient, the next interaction with a family, the next interaction with one of my teammates. As Dr. Agarwal said, making sure not just that we feel things, but that we say things. Thank you. When you're on rounds, thank you for that presentation. That was an excellent, that was an exemplary presentation. We thank after our trauma resuscitation, we thank the residents, the fellows, the trauma docs that come down to the emergency department. Do you thank the housekeepers? Do you say thanks for cleaning this up? Because that's an important concept. So focus on the next play.
Yeah, that's great. From a personal perspective, what can you watch out for? What are some warning signs for personal rust out?
Yeah, personal rust out is that sense that I'm on the pathway towards feeling it's too much. The job stressors are too high, my capacity is too low, or resiliency is too low. And so you might say, I'm not really exhausted, but you might find yourself with a tense neck. You might find yourself with an upset stomach. You might find yourself with a little bit of a headache because you're dehydrated and you haven't been paying attention to, you're a performance athlete, invest in yourself, invest in your team. So it's on the way towards, if not to the point. And let's just be clear, I didn't have time to talk about it. For a lot of people, the more critical care oriented you are, admitting to burnout is admitting failure. It's not. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not failure. It's a logical consequence of the system we work in and the importance of reinvesting in ourselves. It starts with you. The work begins within. And then we can have the courage to change the system.
Awesome. I know we've gotten a few questions about this topic. How can you tell the difference between situations when resiliency will help and when the working conditions are truly unsustainable?
Well, on the short term, resiliency is always helpful in terms of getting through that acute crisis in which you are there. Delaminating, falling apart, losing it. I mean, these are all ways we talk with each other. But so getting through that acute thing, but then instantly switching to the next play to say, we got to change that system. Folks, let's talk about what just happened. Let's talk about that trauma resuscitation, or let's talk about the fact that, I'm in orthopedic surgery and I was on call this weekend and I got 25 people who needed an appointment, but we didn't block any appointments for those people. So let your resiliency fuel changing the culture, because we say patient first, but do we live patient first, and changing the systems and processes.
Yeah, absolutely. How can you approach conversations or dealing with rust out with your leaders to find solutions?
Well, not to get ridiculous over and over, but the work begins within, thinking, okay, I'm going to approach this conversation in a positive way. And for example, you'd say, thank you for running this service. We appreciate it. I've learned so much, but I'd love to help find ways that we can fix this service and make it work better. To say, why are we doing it this way and why not? I mean, if you think about, one of the questions I saw was flow. What is flow? Flow is adding value and eliminating waste in any process, both for the patient and the family, but also for the people who are a part of the team. So we might eliminate waste that the patient doesn't even know about or recognize, but it is good for us, makes us jump for joy better because we've been able to fix the systems. And if you're in a leadership position, and who's in a leadership position? Everyone on this call. Everyone who's not on this call is a leader. We started with that, okay? And begin to create cultures where want to know how can we do it better? How can we do it better? Have the courage to ask the patient, did you feel a part of the team? Talk to the family. Did you feel a part of the team? No, I felt like a breathing brick. A lot of stuff was just happening to me. Nobody told me what all these tests and x-rays and things were for. So does that help?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Many of our medical students just celebrated Match Day last week. Do you have a sentence or two that you would, what advice would you give to many of them who are heading across the country into new environments and new areas of culture for them as well?
Oh, great question. First of all, congratulations to everybody. And just have fun to begin with. But Let me tell you a quick story about how I became a medical student. I told you I was a football player, so I wasn't all that bright to begin with. I was a theology major, so what's that all about? Why is there air and things like that? So it wasn't until I was a junior, that a couple of professors pulled me aside, one from theology and one from biology. And the biology professor's name was Dr. Prey. This sounds like some allegorical poem, but it's not. It said, do you ever think about you might have more influence on people if you became a doctor instead of staying in theology? And I said, look, I don't think about anything. I just go forward fast, try again, or fail again, fail better. So at any rate, I was taking a whole bunch of courses as a junior and senior that everybody else took when they were freshmen, including Chemistry 101. And there's a point to this story. It might not seem that way right now. So Dr. Keith White, Chemistry 101, we take the first test. The test has 100 questions on it, but it's got something in the back that's kind of weighing it down, makes the test feel a little odd. No worries. So the first question on this test was, a mole is Avogadro's number of particles, and you're supposed to fill in the blank. And I thought, this has been fun, back to theology we go, because I don't have a clue. I don't know what any word in those sentences that in that sentence mean, period. So I just started, I'm not encouraging this, particularly on in-service exams, but I started going A, B, C, D, E, D, B, C, A. And football, we call that a sluggo route, a slant and go route. And who was the first person done with their test? Me, because I didn't read the questions. I didn't even read them. But at the end, there's this envelope and it says bonus question. And at the bottom, it says, if you get this question right, no matter what you got what score you got on this test, you'll get an A. And I thought, hey, let's go. Hopefully it's not Avogadro and his number. But I opened it up and it says, what's the name of the man who cleans this room every night so you can have a great place in which to learn? And I walked up. I was the first person done, remember that? And I said, Dr. White, this bonus question. And he smiled. And I said, do you want his first name or his last name? His eyes got big and he said, if you can give me his first name and his last name, I'll not only give you an A on this test, I'll give you an A on the whole course, as long as you show up and as long as you do the work. And I said, well, what if I can give you the name of his wife and the names and ages of his 6 kids? He literally stood up, took off his glasses and said, if you do that, you'll get an A, not just in this course, but in every chemistry course you teach or take. And he was as good as his work. I didn't get any smarter. So what's the point? I became a doctor, not because I was smart, certainly, as you can tell, not because I'm good looking, but because of a janitor. And I was kind to him and he was kind to me. And he'd come in every night. I'd be there at 3 a.m. because I had to do all the theology work, all the football, and then come in at night to the chemistry lab. So just remember the folks along the way. Remember one of the greatest leading experts, I didn't say leadership, leading experts, is somebody most of you have never heard of. Jean Ann has, I know. And what that person says is, leading should not be a matter of what to do or what to know, but how to be. How to be. And that leader is Frances Hesselbein, and the organization she led was Girl Scouts of America. So to all the medical students, regardless of what you're going in, congratulations, hard work, good job. Be the kind of person people see your face and smile, hear your name and smile, see your name on the schedule and think, oh, good, it's going to be a good day. It's going to be better today. And say thank you 50 times a day.
Yeah, that's awesome. We only have time for a couple more questions. I did want to ask about this. Can you talk about the relationship between passion and burnout? And do you feel that those are inversely proportional, or if you have more of one, the other goes down? How would you describe that relationship?
Oh, it's a great question. And so is it related? Is it inversely or positively related? And the answer is, the more passion you have, the more passion you have to connect and reconnect. Now, conversely, the more disappointment you may face, because if your standards are very high and you have deep passion for what you do, and you not just want to say, what's the matter with you, find it, fix it, but what matters to you, then yes, you open yourself up to being slightly more disappointed or profoundly more disappointed. First time one of my patients died, I was bereft. I was absolutely bereft. But because of that passion and how I got to that passion, because it's almost circular instead of inverse, that the more passion you have, the more you have the ability to develop adaptive capacity and resiliency and to translate that passion to others. Don't just be passionate for yourself, be passionate for your teams, be passionate for your organization, and carry the voice of the patient, the most powerful voice anywhere. I represent 2,500 players to the NFL. They say they have all the power and they're wrong. I have all the power because I have the voice of the player patient. You have the voice of your patient. Be ready to tell the story of your patient.
What if what is good for you and your growth isn't good for the team?
Well, I think you have to have discussion with the team. First, you have to have discussion with yourself. You know, why is this so good for me, but it's not good for the team? Maybe that the team is mired in a culture that is a toxic culture. And I'm not saying anything about medical school, but I'm just saying I often show a slide that shows a bunch of kids playing in the sandbox. And my question is that how we select medical students? And the answer is no. What we've traditionally done, and I'm not saying anything about the Heersink school, but traditionally we've chosen people who could crawl over the backs of other students to get higher grades, to get higher scores, to get better references. And then we put them in a residency program or medical school, then residency program, then graduate them, and then say, oh, by the way, you have to play in the sandbox. You have to lead teams. You have to be willing to coach and mentor. You have to be willing to be coached and mentored. And so one of the things I admire the most about the Heersink School is you've begun to address that very meaningfully. Witness, and now you may say, this is the stupidest grand rounds I've ever heard. You know, Dr. Larson may have to be careful about what people say to her about why they got Dr. Mayer to come talk, but it's at least an investment in trying to say, we care about you, not just your metrics, not just your results, but you as the person. We care about not just what to do and what to know, but how to be as a person.
Thank you. We got, I think, time for just one more. What advice do you have for individuals who have already reached that point of burnout and recognize it in themselves?
Well, the first thing is throw your guilt in the trunk. As soon as you get ready to walk into that facility, you know, most of you take a car, maybe you take a motorcycle, but you got some kind of storage thing. Open it up, take all your guilt, package it up, and throw it away. Because we have to find a cleaner burning fuel than guilt. We can't have guilt fuel us all the time. I missed the diagnosis yesterday, or I did this or that, or the patient's PO2 dropped despite my best efforts. We have to be able to say, you know, leave it behind. Why? Because guilt's not going to help you. There might be places where it does, but healthcare is not one of them. Not for anybody, not for any person whatsoever. And so having that ability to say, how do you get back? You focus on the next play. You know, how did the Patriots, and if you hear a Patriot hater or a Brady hater, I apologize, but how did they come back from the biggest deficit at halftime in NFL history? And the answer is one play at a time, the next play. Belichick said, if we could only get within one touchdown, I knew we could win it. Now, you can't look at the score at halftime and say, does it really matter? Every play matters. Every play with the patient matters. Every interaction with our colleagues matter. The seams of the team matter. And when they start to show, we have to take time to mend those seams and to build those bridges and to listen silently to say, I think I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong. Help me learn how to be right.
Awesome. Dr. Mayer, thank you so much. A reminder to everyone, Battling Healthcare Burnout, Learning to Love the Job You Have While Creating the Job You Love. It's available on Amazon, Kindle, wherever you get your books. Thank you so much for your time, sir. And with that, I will turn the floor over to Dr. Agarwal.
Thank you, Noah. Dr.
you.
Mayer, again, thank you so much for really a phenomenal presentation. And we had several questions that we could not get to because of time constraints, but we truly appreciate you taking your time to do this for us today. Also want to take an opportunity to thank our communications team, Paige, Jessica, the others, and also Dr. Gina and Larson for organizing this and a great introduction of our speaker today.
Feel free to shoot those questions to me either collectively or anybody on the call. Just shoot them to me in an email. I'll answer you. I may be a little delayed in Ukraine, but they have internet.
Great. Thank you all very much and have a wonderful rest of the day and a great weekend.
Thanks all.
Thanks.